so much for joining us today. You may have just met my training product manager, Sarah Nell. Sarah Nell, in addition to being my product manager, used to be a training consultant, or a consultant, a trainer. Before that, she was a customer of Tableau. She knows a lot about Tableau. She knows a lot about how hard it can be to learn Tableau. And she's learned a lot about what it takes to run a really effective training program.
Whew, I got to catch my breath here. This is my wonderful coworker and co-speaker, Sandlin, and she's a senior e-learning developer, but she also is an amazing designer who takes big ideas and turns them into amazing content for her customers.
Thanks, Sarah. So today we're going to be talking about training programs, and so it may surprise you to know that Sarah and I were not always the Rockies of training champions that you see before you today. We had to learn a lot about this, so I wanted to get a sense of the room. How many of you have a Tableau training program or another training program and you're just trying to add Tableau into that and you feel kind of comfortable with the training stuff? Cool, less of you guys, that's great. We have some specific resources I think that can be helpful in that context. So the rest of you then, does this mean that you are sort of realizing, we're gonna have to have a training program? What does that look like? Would that describe the rest of you? Okay, great. So for you, we have a lot of perspective to offer, again, some specific resources. Hopefully this will help you out. And again, we wanna make ourselves very available to you if there are things we can do that would help you be successful. So I know you're not coming to this in a vacuum. There's a couple other talks here today. I want to point out especially this Creating a Center of Excellence talk tomorrow, because it hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of really great stuff at conference this year about building a culture of analytics, building a center of excellence, some of these ideas. So we're not going to talk about that. These other talks about center of excellence and training Tableau tips, these are fantastic. I highly recommend you go check them out. They'll be recorded online. So we're going to focus on training today.
So really what we're going to focus on today is a formalized training program. And we're going to go into details about what we consider to be a formalized training program. But then we're going to get into what some of those required skills might be for building this out. And also, how do you encourage that ongoing growth? But we also want to be realistic with this too. There's a definite investment that's going to need to be made as well. So talking about a formalized training program, let's talk about what we don't consider training in this talk today. We're talking about more formalized courses or classes. It's not that we don't consider other things to be training, but when you're thinking of a program, you want something that's a little more specific. We watched Rocky to create this talk. And as you could see from me running in, I'm definitely not a boxer, just from watching Rocky. But practice is going to help you get there. And we're going to give you some of those key tools to get there as well. So this is the agenda that we're looking at today. Some of these big decisions that you have to think about before you get into training, because that's where it starts. You can't just go straight into a program itself. You can't go straight into creating a class. There's very difficult decisions that do need to be made. And then we're going to go into how do we build this? And that's where a lot of Sandlin's knowledge can come in. How does she take some of these ideas and how do you distill that down into a class or a course? And then we have some really terrific resources for you guys at the end of today as well.
Cool, so let's talk about planning. So before we get too far into this, I just want to say we're going to talk about the context of our training programs at Tableau, which are big and mature and we've done a lot. It is okay to start small. You don't have to have a full catalog to roll out the beginning of your training program. So it's okay. We're going to be all right. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. So when I start talking about a plan, we're going to talk about a lot about the audience. We're going to cover what should go in there, what kind of investments you should be making, and the time frame for that. So when Sarah says we need new training about, the first thing I think about, regardless of what she thinks the training should be about, is I'm always thinking about the audience. It's super important if you want your training to be effective that you understand who they are and what they need. And the primary tool we use for that as instructional designers are training personas. So how many of you are familiar with the idea of a training persona? Cool, a couple hands. So for the rest of you, a training persona is basically kind of a model of the person you're trying to train. So on the off chance you're not just training your 3 coworkers, you're talking about kind of a larger group of folks, and you want to be able to think about not how does every single one of them get trained, but generally what kinds of groups and categories can we understand about them. And when we talk about our training personas, we have a lot of detail in them to really help understand what motivates these folks, what kinds of things are most accessible to them, what are their needs. So we're going to talk about the 5 overall training personas that we use in Tableau. So these are the main personas that we talk about when we're thinking about the courses we build. So as an analyst, you might be familiar with this person, right? Their job is numbers all day, every day. They probably use a fairly formalized path to get that. They might have some formal education about that. We also prepare training for knowledge workers. So these are people who are domain experts in literally anything else, healthcare, retail, whatever. And occasionally, they need to do some number stuff. They're not formally trained. They don't have a formalized process, and they may be kind of in and out of the numbers. We also think about the data steward. So this is probably someone who's supporting a team of maybe analysts, and their job is to make sure that the data is working. They need to understand how those analysts are going to use the data, or those knowledge workers, but they're not actually building dashboards themselves. We also have more recently been thinking about the data artist. So this is someone who's kind of a subset of the analyst, but they're very focused on the visual presentation of how do I make that data story sing? How do I make it beautiful? And so they have different needs about visual best practices than some of the other users. And finally, we talk about the dashboard consumer. So this is someone who's maybe an executive. They see dashboards. They want to be able to give feedback to analysts building dashboards or reports for them, but they're not going to build that stuff themselves. And so when we start to think about these folks in this way, it gives us some clear ideas about how far do these folks need to get. And so Sarah's going to show us tools she built to help kind of break down these things, but I just want to point out one more thing. At this level, we're not talking about an advanced analyst or a beginning analyst. We're talking about all analysts, sort of what is the ideal hope for an analyst. So you will see as we talk about our training programs, we're hoping to build maturity. We're hoping to increase skills, and we expect these things to be dynamic. People's jobs change, the business objectives change, so these things can feel very fuzzy. That's okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandlin. And really, thinking about these personas too, we don't think of them in the terms of data analyst. We don't think of them in the terms of knowledge worker or data steward. Behind the scenes, we have an entire profile built around these individuals. They are real people to us. So when you're thinking about them, think of real people in real positions and what their needs are. So this was a tool I built that is out on Tableau Public, and it's out there to help a person self-identify. Who are they? Because like Sandlin mentioned, there's a maturity cycle that happens, and how do these personas evolve over time as well? So going into these, you're going to see details that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Like going into the analysts, you're going to see why they love Tableau, what a potential job title for them is as well. What do they do in Tableau? That's really important. But also you can see we have something different, like personality type. These are things that really go into these profiles so that it makes it much more personal to us. The more we understand about them and the more we know what their motivations are, the more relevant we can make the materials and the courses that go into them. So this would be an example of the analyst. But then looking over here at the dashboard consumer, you can see that the things that they have are very different as well. So the best way that you can do this is talk to people, get to know the people who are going to be using Tableau. And really going into that then, this is where you take those detailed personalities and figure out what are their learning objectives? What is it they have to accomplish? Within their job, what is their base knowledge of Tableau that is needed? But then that is their own personal learning objective. That's very different than thinking about what is the business objective? What does the business need for that user to accomplish with Tableau too? So there's definitely an intersection, like a Venn diagram, of what you need to accomplish with these individuals. But obviously, you also want every single person to become a champion too. What's going to help these people become champions? No matter what type of persona we're looking at, or what their end goals are, what the business objectives are, I always come back to one single question before I even think about proposing a course to Sandlin or her team. Have they even opened Tableau? What is their assumed knowledge? Or what is their base for knowledge as well? Because no matter what persona you are or where you fall within that, if you have never opened Tableau, that first initial class is going to be the same. You're going to help them to learn the fundamentals and the foundational skills within the tool. And to figure that out, I also have another tool that I built as well. And this is a much more in-depth persona tool. Whereas the other one was more fun, it's really that self-identification. This one takes it even further. And it's an actual quiz that we created. And this is something that is out there for you guys out in Tableau Public as well. This is something we're hoping, if you are considering building out a training program, that this gets you off the ground at least. That you can help find out who those people are and what it is that they need to use. So the introduction of this is really going through what some of those main personas are. And you can probably see we don't have data artists out there. And that's because, like Sandlin said, it's part of what we consider to be analyst. A path is very similar to that. So going into this, you can go into different questions and figure out who these people are, how they're going to use Tableau. And on this side, you can see that it's initially about what their background is. And then it matches you with a persona. And it tells you what percentage of that persona it is. So in this one, you can see based off of the responses, they're a data analyst. But you can also see that they have some knowledge worker in there, but some data steward. But if they were going to learn, it was definitely on a similar path to what the data analyst is today. And going from there, then, it would end up showing you a recommended path for their learning path as well. And I will show you that at the end, because my computer's decided not to work with me right now. But it's out there on Tableau Public for you.
Awesome. So, okay, we've talked a lot about the audience. Again, this is probably the most important part, but in the planning phase is a time I really recommend. Now is a good time to think about the investment in materials. Does it make sense for you to buy a course? Would it be preferable to build your own course? I will say this is a task that is not for the faint of heart. It takes a lot of time to build a course. Is there a course that you could buy that you maybe would want to supplement with other materials? So that's a good thing to think about during planning. The other big thing is timing. So I'll think about this from two different ways. One is how much time does the user have, both in terms of how long is their ramp? They have 6 months to get skilled up or 2 weeks? And then how much time do they have to commit to training? Is it okay to pull them off the job for 2 or 4 days at a time? Or do we need to figure out how we're doing something kind of over lunches and during breaks and other activity? And then the other question about time is how much time do you have to prepare those materials? If those people with their 2-week ramp are coming in a month, sounds like you've got a month to prepare. If you have more time to sort of work with, that might open you up to doing different kinds of things in terms of building out your program.
And when you're thinking about building out this program, we really want to encourage you, though. Just because you have this great idea, you've done all that research to figure out who your personas are, it doesn't necessarily mean that all that research is going to result in an amazing course. So part of the advice that we need to give you guys is they can't all be winners at all. And part of that is who's watched Rocky 1? All right, some of you. So you probably know where I'm going with this. That in Rocky 1, he totally lost. He did not win at all. But it's really about making sure that you keep going, that you're not discouraged if something doesn't work out. And as a product manager, you have to be prepared for your product to sometimes fail, that you learn from that and that you can make better decisions because of that. Who remembers this amazing knockout? Who took this course? What's new? 9.0. Oh, hey, what? We had people take this? I think you're all 9 people who took it then. This was a course that, based off of our research, and also you're here at conference, one of the most amazing courses and ideas that people love about Tableau is the new features. So we thought, based off of that, based off of people loving what the new features are in Tableau, that a course specifically about the new features between versions would be an amazing choice. But we had all of 9 people attend this course. So it definitely did not work as well as we thought it would. But we found out some amazing information from this. We found out that people love to learn about their new features in a setting like conference, or they also like their new features folded into our existing courses as well. They don't like these separate, isolated courses. So that enabled us to make better decisions because of that.
So you'll get the sense as we're sort of giving this talk, we're a pretty big team. Sarah's one of 3 product managers we have. We have 14, maybe almost 20 different trainers that deliver our training to customers. And in addition, we have maybe a dozen people on the curriculum team that are building out materials for all these courses. So we have a lot of expertise to draw from and build on. And it's really great when you can get to use the expertise of others on your team in a really effective way.
Sometimes, though, you don't have that big team around you. Sometimes you are the only person building out this team. Maybe you are brand new to Tableau. Maybe you're a partner and you're just trying to see what you can do with Tableau. But it doesn't mean that you can't be successful as a single team. Before I joined Tableau, I belonged to a partner as well, and I was the only Tableau person. But you learn to utilize resources, and you learn to develop your community and build your community where it is. But it also goes back to that bit of coaching that Sandlin gave you earlier. Sometimes you have to start small. And that's why learning what works and what doesn't work is also just as equally important.
So now we're going to talk about building out the program. I'm going to cover some real specifics. Before we get there, though, just a reminder, you want to keep your focus on the learner, on the audience. Think about their needs and outcomes. I'm going to cover a lot of stuff. If it's overwhelming, keep your focus on the learner. So in terms of the development, I'm going to talk about instructional design. I'm going to talk about the development and production work that we actually do. And I'm going to talk about the logistics of running a program. So when we start instructional design work, we tend to think about this idea of scope and sequence. How far does this training need to get us? And what order do we have to put it in order for that to work? So there's this instructional idea called scaffolding that really helps build out ideas. And this is sort of the idea that complicated ideas are built from simple ideas. Let me give you an example. We want our advanced users to be able to write window calculations in the calculation editor. This is probably not the first calculation we want people to write, though. So the way we do this is at the beginning of our fundamentals course, we teach people about quick table calculations. This warms them up to the idea of a calculation that's dependent on data in the view. They work with that, they get comfortable with it. In our intermediate course, we take them to the table calculation editor. This gets them very comfortable with scope and sequence, thinking about maybe secondary table calculations, and trying to apply that in more ways. And then in that advanced class, then we can sort of drop the ball of, hey, you can write these things in the calculation editor. And now it's not overwhelming. So these are complicated ideas built out of simple ideas. This does a couple things. It helps to reinforce those basics, and it helps to make those complicated things stick. So this is really, the reiteration is essential for learning retention. So chances are very good that all of you will be training adults. So adults can be a little bit of a special beast.
Can I see who's going to be training adults? I'm just curious.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Just making sure.
So adults, we think about having very particular needs and interests, and chances are if you're bringing in Tableau, this is probably something new and different, and you want to do as much as you can to reduce friction with this big change. So it might be really tempting to build your course out of like super fun data like Pokemon and Spotify, and that's so fun. Chances are really good your learners will hate it because they'll feel like you're wasting their time. They won't be able to see the connection to what they're doing. If you want a really effective training program, you've got analysts that have to connect to a server, build particular workbooks, maybe do particular things with their data sources. Train them on that. It will be obvious why they need to know these things, and it immediately begins reinforcing these job tasks that they'll be doing on a regular basis. So people often want to know how we decide what gets covered in various classes, and specifically how we decide like what is a fundamentals user. So up on our website, we have our course objectives. I think they're pretty clearly laid out. Here's an example of what we put in our Desktop 1 course. So we think a fundamentals user ought to be able to do things like connect to data, maybe try out a calculation, build a handful of different chart types. We try and make it pretty clear what people will be learning up front so they're not surprised, so they can make sure that they're feeling good about what they're getting into. I see some photos, okay.
Cool.
We have that kind of information up for all of our courses. So if you go to tableau.com/learning and go to the classroom training, you can get more details about every course we offer and what we think is appropriate to put in there.
And while you're going out there and looking at the website, if you want to look at how our courses are prepared, the one thing that you're going to notice right away that one course size does not fit all. We have multiple different courses, and this really goes back to those personas once again, that we need to make sure that we're creating courses that are relevant for each of those personas and along their maturity with the use of Tableau. So don't feel like one course is going to do everything. You have to think ahead about that. How do I treat beginners? But then how do I go from there? What's their next level of knowledge that I need to account for? And that really ties back in what Stanley was talking about scaffolding and how we would approach that.
So another aspect of one size doesn't fit all that we think about a lot is modality. So when you think about training, you probably think about coming into a room, standing with a trainer, maybe they're talking at you for a while, maybe you're doing stuff in the same room as that trainer. We do offer a lot of training this way. It's very effective. A lot of people like learning this way. However, it doesn't always work for everyone, specifically if you have to come from some great distance to get into that room. So this is why we've also offered most of our courses virtually as well. So you can log into a WebEx, a web conference. The trainer is still there. You get that interactivity. You get to be with other people, still do those same hands-on activities. But this allows us to give training to folks who are not all in the same physical location and maybe who don't have the 2 full days of cleared schedule. So the way we run our virtual classrooms is that same material that was 2 full days becomes half days all week. And the last one, and the one I'm the most excited about, is eLearning. So this is another solution we have for people who can't all come to the same room and maybe don't have big blocks of time in their schedule to clear out for training. So eLearning is a way we can offer training to folks anywhere, anytime. You log in, this is asynchronous. There's not a trainer physically there. These are recordings, they're interactive, there's hands-on activity. You get the chance to do that same material we talk about, 2 days of training for each of the courses that are up there, but you don't have to log in at any particular time. In addition, this e-learning is very modular, so we can do it in short snippets. Maybe you don't have 2 hours at a time. Maybe 10 minutes is really all you can commit. That's where e-learning comes in. So Sarah told me I wasn't allowed to talk about e-learning for a full 50 minutes, but if you want to come learn more.
That's why we have a booth.
Yeah, if you want to learn more, please come check out the Global Services Hub in the data village of fantasticness, wherever, the place where all the things are happening, we're down there too. So another thing I sort of alluded to when we're talking about modality is structuring the content. Specifically, we put in a lot of hands-on content. It's important for us that learners get the chance to practice the things that we're talking about in class, that they're actually getting a chance to try these things. This is so important for retention of these important ideas. So when we're designing courses, we let at least a third of the material we design be those hands-on activities. This gives them the immediate chance to try things out, the immediate chance to clarify, was that confusing, and get some of those misconceptions resolved as soon as possible. So we find this is incredibly important.
So while you're tracking some of these things, and we're talking about a lot of different things, we've gone from personas, who are those people, what do they know? All right, how do we build out some of these materials? But all of those decisions are leading to one thing. What is that final deliverable product that I need to have? And these are the things that we have when we complete our courses. If you're taking our virtual courses or our public courses, we always make sure there's a manual available. So all these ideas of practices and concepts, we make sure it's something printed that they can consume and look at. There's a visual aspect to it. But along with that, we also create starter files and also solution files. All of these are done in Tableau. We have found, especially for beginner users, that they're going to struggle in certain areas. And when they struggle in these certain areas, they don't necessarily retain or absorb as much knowledge. So we want to set them up for success. And that's exactly what that starter file does. And if they get stuck, we want to unstick them. And that's why we give them solution files too. But in addition to that, we think about what do they need for e-learning. This is a totally different modality now. They're not in a classroom, they don't have an instructor, they don't have a manual. How do we do those same things for our learners and our students? So throughout the content, when Sam was talking about modular content, we want to make sure to check in with them. We want to make sure that whatever they're learning, we're giving them something so they can level set. Do they need to take something again, or can they move forward? So it's really important to assess knowledge during this time too. But along with that, we make sure to provide them with those starter and solution files as well. But we don't want to leave our trainers behind. And this is where it goes back. Do you have a team or do you have yourself? Do you have someone who's going to be delivering this training, or is it going to be you? We want to make sure if it's someone else that they have all the details that are needed. So we create a very detailed agenda for them. We break it down to the minute within hours. So we say, here's how much time you should be spending on this. We see this as a priority as far as like maybe calculations or dashboards. Or we assign less time to something that maybe doesn't take as long or is more foundational, but it's easier to consume. But Tableau is a visual tool, and we need to explain what some of those visual processes are, so we use PowerPoint to do that. A whiteboard can only accomplish so much, and when you have a room of people, PowerPoint can really help do that, as you can see today. But also, we have an instructor manual. And the instructor manual is going to give them a lot of gotchas. Research we've done, maybe a visualization that we found that's going to be impactful, something that they need to know that they can potentially share with their classroom too. But all of this comes together. You have your materials, you have your type of class, you have the number of classes, but now you have to make some decisions about logistics. And this enters a different game now. You've developed your product, how do you deliver your product? So you have to think about, where is this going to happen? You have to think about how many people are going to be in this first initial class. And we have found from our research that the most popular class by far is a foundational course for people who have never used Tableau at all. So we have to make sure to create more frequent schedules for that and more places for that as well. But also, once they take that course, we want to make sure that we're accommodating for time between those courses, that we let them start using Tableau in a real life scenario at work so they can have some of that stickiness of the knowledge. But then, how often do you repeat these courses? How many people need this foundational knowledge? How is it going to be every month, every week? These are decisions that you're going to have to make as well. We had fun with this talk, can you tell? But this is me giving Sandlin feedback about her feedback. But really, feedback is going to help you keep your course relevant. For all of those decisions that you have made up to this point, people change. The content is going to change. Technology changes. How do you keep the course being what people need it to be? Behind every course that we offer today, we create an opportunity to that we get feedback. What you're seeing here is data that I've been gathering, and I also analyze. We have surveys in all of our courses. So in each of our classrooms, we have an instructor giving a survey to our students. So behind every single number you see on this slide, I see a person. And we have some really highly rated courses, and that's for a really good reason. And you can see we have a lot of people distributed between our 9s and 8s. That doesn't mean I want to ignore them, and I do not want to grow complacent with people being happy with my material. I'm going to dive into this data, and I'm going to find out, why do they like this material? What is working for them? What are they considering relevant to their job today? But underneath that too, there are obviously people who don't necessarily enjoy that content, or it wasn't relevant to them. That feedback is almost more important to me because I want to make sure that I'm creating something that works for them. And accepting feedback can be a really hard thing to do. And you're going to see this. As adults, just like Sam was talking about adult learners, we don't like change, and we don't like not being right sometimes. And we can be stubborn creatures. But people are going to tell you what they think. And especially if you're going to be building out a training program, you definitely have to learn to accept this feedback. It is by far one of the most relevant things that I can do in my job today. And you're going to have people telling you they should have done something else before they took this course. And this last one, the Desktop 3 Advanced, this is one of our most advanced courses. And there should be a lot of Tableau knowledge in place before you take this. They took this as their first class. So they definitely were not going to be very happy with that. But I had to think about that critically. I had to think about what are the things I'm doing that they're going to this class first. So this really led to me having to make decisions about how we put our materials out there. Is there something obvious that I'm not doing? And when I looked, there was something I wasn't doing. If you went out to our PDFs about a year ago, they were not giving people prerequisites at all. And they were not telling people what they should have taken before that or what their level of Tableau knowledge should be. So I changed that. It was a really simple change. But then I did a thing in addition to that. I created this quiz. And this quiz is out on Tableau Public as well. And I definitely encourage you to go out and use this. And in 6 easy questions, I can determine what course should you be in. And we've had a lot of success. There's a lot of people who are happier with our courses now because of that. But also, I've had over 50,000 hits on this quiz alone. That tells me people need something like this. So definitely feel free to use this yourself. And that's going to be reflected in your surveys or however you're gathering your data. People are going to tell you if they're happy or if they're not happy. And you're going to see a change when you make that change too. We've talked a lot about how we create our training program, and that's because we've been doing this for a while. This is our everyday job, but you guys are here for a reason because you have to build out training programs too. So we went ahead and we interviewed a couple people who are doing programs out there in the wilds of Tableau land, and one of the first interviews that we did was with InterWorks. And Carly, she is running an enablement program with InterWorks. They are considered one of our training partners. So all those classes that we talked about, they are taking those courses and delivering them. But they're going a step further. They're going and figuring out what are those logistics that a customer needs as well. What are those fine-tuning things that they can help with? She's been doing this program for about 5 years now, but it's only in the last 2 years that it's really taken off. And I think that's because there's been an increased demand for training programs with Tableau. She will also confirm that their most popular course, just like us, is our foundational course, our fundamentals course. It's that first course people use when they're opening Tableau for the first time. But she also supplements that with an office hours right after that class. So she delivers that course, and then they have time where the people who are in that class can come to them and ask questions that are relevant to their everyday work. She's taught so many students that she can't even count. I asked her some advice on what she would say to you guys if you're going to be creating a training program. And she said, if you're thinking about it, there's a need. But also identify who those champions are who can help you, because they're the ones who are going to help drive that enablement culture. They're the ones who are going to exist when you're not there teaching that class. And one of those champions started off as Chris Toomey. Does anyone know who Chris is at all? Yep, couple hands. He's a little Tableau famous. If you see him, take a picture. Hey, he's in the back. There, you can take pictures afterwards. But Chris is one of those people who was an internal champion, and he had to identify that there was a need to create training. And that's because he was helping with the entire Tableau installation at Zillow, which is a real estate company. And so he was seeing a lot of different defects happening with people using Tableau and knew that training would help reduce that. When we talked about where sometimes you're alone, Chris is alone in this. And this is not his full-time job. He does training in addition to his full-time job. And by far, the most popular course, just like Carly was, just like we are, the basics course. And the population of the people who needed basics was much bigger, so he was having a course every 2 weeks. But now, because he has done that education for his population, it's reduced to every quarter. And just solo, Chris, he's taught over 150 students. And when I asked him advice that he wanted to give to you, he said, design the training around what people say they need. And this goes back to those learning objectives and those business objectives again. What does a person need to know? Definitely bring that into what you're thinking about building for your company today.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot about what it will take to develop a program. I just want to reiterate some of the resources we talked about and make sure you feel like we're here to help you. We want to make sure you've got the right tools to be successful, whether that's with our training or finding another way to deliver your own training. So we've got resources to help you think about the audience, about the courses that we offer, and other training program sort of support. So first, this training personas viz, you can find this is published on Sarah's profile. If you Google SNEL on Tableau Public.
Or Snell, as people say. Snell, yeah.
Yeah, that'll get you to this one, which is a very powerful way to kind of help you start thinking about the population you're working with. Once you kind of have a good handle on who those folks are, again, also on her Tableau Public account is this persona checklist tool. So this is a really great one if you can get your users to take it, or if you feel like you understand them well enough, take it on behalf of, you know, each business org or however you're kind of breaking down and organizing those folks. This is a great tool to help kind of cement what a learning path might look like for those. In addition, you can find resources about all of our training on tableau.com/classroom. This includes our classroom training as well as e-learning. Oh, and did someone say e-learning? We could talk about that all day long at the Global Services Hub. Again, we're down in the Data Village.
And really, we hope that we were able to give you some really relevant information today, but it really goes back to your audience. Who's that person who's going to be consuming these courses? And what do they need? And design whatever they need, design the course around them. Also, you're going to have to make an investment in materials. That is by far going to be one of the largest places as far as your time goes. Definitely between us, it's not something that we take lightly at all. We plan for this. But also, structure your program to support whatever your business initiatives are. When do people need to be ramped up by? Are you going to have to do something much more quickly, or do you have time to develop something long term? But also, get that feedback, because if you want to know how successful that course is going to be or where you need to make changes, create a survey somehow to capture the data that can help support the decisions you need to make as well. But also, we have some great resources for you guys, and we really hope that you leverage them in the future. And I can see how many people looked at my Tableau public profile, so I'll know if you guys are out there. But more than anything, we want to help. We're both invested in the Tableau community, and we're invested in people learning Tableau. So definitely connect with us and talk with us too.
So while we still have your attention, if you would please fill out the survey. This is the first time we've delivered this talk. I think that there's a need for this sort of thing. We would love to hear what you want more or less of. Is it more or less sports analogies, better soundtrack? Just let us know, whatever your feedback is.
At sports, we actually know.
And on that, I'd love to say thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us today. Thank you for letting us talk about the work that we do that we're so passionate about. We've got time for questions if there are any. Otherwise, please enjoy the rest of your conference. It's been great spending time with you.
Thank you. Yes, we have a question. Yes. So the question is, if there's a lot of training resources online for Tableau, how do you know when to use those training resources and how to create your own? And that's really going to go back to you understanding what your business needs. Is the stuff that we have out online going to support that? And an example I have is I've been doing Tableau Doctor this week. I love Tableau Doctor. And yesterday I had a gentleman who, it was his first time opening Tableau at conference this week, which was amazing. So just walking him through how he needs to build a visualization. And I went out to the free videos to see what there was on the free video to help support him after he left Doctor. And for the things that we discussed, not everything was there. So you're going to have to think about that. What do we have and what don't you have? And you're going to have to fill in where those gaps are. So it's really going to take some analysis on your part to figure that out. If that helps. There's definitely a lot of people. I mean, I wanted time to show you more people who are creating their own Tableau training programs. I had a handful of people who I could have just put up there. There are a lot of people creating their own content. Chris, who we were talking about, he creates his own content. Carly does create some of her own content too. So there are a lot of people doing that today. Yes? Okay. The question is, are there sample data sets that would go outside of sales data for the courses that we do today? That's definitely something that we think about on a regular basis. We like to create a safe data space when people are first learning, and that's something that is hard for us sometimes because how do we know what's relevant within that industry? So we would love to partner with people like you.
Can I get a question from this end of the room? Yeah.
We offer quite a bit of training as a result of people telling us through surveys that Tableau is one of the major training options that they want. But then when it comes time to actually have those training sessions, we get very low turnout. So I was wondering if you have any suggestions on how to bridge that gap from people saying, yes, this is something I want, for them to actually show up and get that training.
Yeah, so the question is, we run training, but people don't show up. How do you get them to commit to follow through on training? Do you have thoughts on that, Sarah?
I do, actually. That's a really great question and such a relevant question, too. Because how do you motivate people and how do you get that engagement? And that was one of the conversations I had with Chris, too, when they were talking about, when we were talking about how created his program. And it's an actual business initiative that his management champions, that they actually have to take this training and they have to get a certificate to sign off on certain uses of Tableau because they want it to be run the most efficient way possible. So maybe look for a champion who can be part of that and say, this is something you need to do for your job. Yes. So the question is if we have a course on how to interpret your data. And we do to some extent. Some of our courses talk about, well, there's the data interpreter that's out on Tableau. And we do talk about that in some of our courses. And we had a course at conference this year called Data for the Analyst. And that really went into how do you think about your data and bringing it over and the structure of your data and the questions you need to ask about it. But that's not one that we really offer publicly. And we found it goes back to the persona as well, that people do have a need for that, but the people who have the need for that are a smaller population. But it's always in the back of our minds. How do we make that course come to life so more people want to take it? But that's a really good question.
Is there another question over here? Yeah, hi. It's fine. Can I get this one? So the question is, how do you sort of balance the difference between a self-starter, or as we call them, an adult learner, who's got their own idea about what they need to know, versus saying, like, we want to make sure you actually have this level of proficiency. So the way we've done that with our training programs, we have these credentials. You can be qualified or certified. And we recommend a certain kind of training to hit those credentials, but it's not required. So some form of assessment that helps you figure out, do you know this stuff? Are you ready? Whether or not people are taking your training or figuring it out on their own, or some combination of the above, that can help, right? So breaking it up, the difference between like doing the training and being able to perform at that level. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah. So that's the free training videos online? Probably.
Is it appropriate if we have an internal learning system to put those videos in there with credits to Tableau so that we can track whether people are watching them or not? Is that an appropriate use of your content?
That is a great question.
What we've done is we've linked to them, but then the links change, and then the link's bad. So, I just have like a Word document that says, here's like 10 recommended videos to get you started. And so, and in another session I was in, they said that our account manager can tell us who's gone and looked at what videos through your CRM.
Oh.
But I wonder if it's appropriate for us to like take those MPEGs, use them, and then replace them later.
Can I get your contact information and follow up with you? Yeah, thanks.
And can I just give you credit for being just really, no, that's great.
Were there other questions? Yeah, hi.
Piggybacking on the question earlier, from our experience, we have a good turnout for trainings, but then nothing happens afterwards. So, in your experience, what are users like aha moments for getting excited to the journey of learning Tableau? Is it going to create that first dashboard? Is it following up on them? Is it making their manager make sure they're on board so
Yeah.
their day job? Or
So, yeah. So the question is, if we can deliver training, but how do we make sure that's actually impacting real change? And so that sort of covers some of these other ideas about building a culture of analytics and making sure that the general sense is like, yes, we do things in Tableau, so people buy into that. I think you're hitting on a couple things there, though. I think people kind of get it when they build their first dashboard and it's kind of interactive and they're like, and I change the tooltip and I look super smart right now. Like, I think that's kind of the place where people kind of feel like they have their first win, and that kind of helps them buy into it. The other idea that we don't cover specifically in our training programs, but is this idea of informal learning, the idea that you want to reinforce people's ability to kind of self-identify as successful with this. So giving them opportunities. This is where things like the community has supported Makeover Monday or Workout Wednesday really help people feel like, yeah, I'm part of the community. I'm a Tableau person. I do these things. So if there's ways within your organization, like running a Tableau user group, creating office hours, just making it sort of feel like it's a very soft, easy sort of launch into becoming this. But I guess sort of the carrot and the stick of that is like, and if it's important that things are done in this new way, like maybe you do need to make it a manager requirement that makes sure that they're following up with their folks and saying, thank you for the report, but it needs to be in Tableau. Some combination therein. But hopefully some of those other talks, and did you get those or should I switch back to the slide? Okay, cool. I would recommend you go to those because I think that might help address some of those issues as well.
Some of that too, it is community, but I think one of the things we didn't really talk about that this question really makes me think about too is there's a lot on your shoulders creating a training program, and you are going to have to be the world's biggest cheerleader at your company to do this. So there's going to be a lot that falls on you to increase engagement. You're going to have to champion people when they have wins, when they do something, acknowledging this amazing thing that they did. Like Visit the Day, how we champion people on a daily basis in order to showcase what they did. Maybe do something like that. But the sense of community where it creates that social aspect. And that's really, don't make it all about work necessarily all the time. Create those opportunities to really release that pressure valve, the pressure to have to learn Tableau all the time. But I also think that's where Sandlin talked about the most relevant content if you can show them that you're going to make their life easier by learning Tableau, that you're going to help them to have more time in a certain area, that's where you can help reduce resistance. Because the less that resistance is, the more they're going to want to participate as well. No problem.
Yeah, were there other questions?
I love that you guys are
Yeah.
asking questions.
You mentioned training resources, having an agenda and PowerPoint and an instructor manual. Are those available from Tableau?
They are not, unfortunately. Those are all things that we deliver, just to give you guys an idea of what you potentially would need to create to support that as well.
Other questions? Yeah.
Better feedback suggestions than just surveys and kind of people trying to get into the
Yeah, so surveys are hard. In e-learning, we've just implemented like a lesson by lesson, is this helpful, kind of like thumbs up, thumbs down. We also get feedback from the trainers. So people might say like, yeah, class was fine or whatever, and the trainer will be like, everything went fine until mapping fell apart and people just checked out. They were not into it. Unfortunately, I think you're thinking of a lot of kind of qualitative kinds of ways to get that specific connection. There are sort of other things you can think about, like, are we seeing more people log into server? Are we actually posting more vises in some effective way? But it can be a little bit hard to tie that directly back to like, good thing we ran that class on Thursday because Friday things really happened, you know? So it's hard, and that's one of the things that Sarah's really good at, but that is like a very hard part of her job, is this kind of qualitative trying to make sense of the change of the winds, right?
You're going to have to talk to people. I know. But the best feedback, aside from a survey, is talking directly to people and finding out what worked for them and just letting them know that this is a safe space to talk and you want real feedback because you want to make this as relevant as you possibly can. Oh, yeah, I buy so much coffee for people.
We had another question here, yeah.
In my experience with the training in Tableau, there's some areas there that we have gaps in terms of what's being offered. And when we want to have our company go to a self-analytics company, we have to change the mindset of how they approach data. And so you can give the basic Tableau training, but there's this whole mindset of how you look at data and analyze it. Kind of refer to this question that you have to have something that allows and teaches us how to think differently, what questions to ask differently. And I see that there's no real gap there, that you're not really providing that. You're kind of when you do the class, but you get a feel for that. But I think there's more focus that could be done that way. The other areas, Tableau server, there's two aspects to that. One, your end user training. There's really nothing that out of the in your courses that says, here's how to use Tableau server and from an end user perspective, you kind of have to develop that internally. And then from a site admin perspective, the current courses are very heavy server admin or architecture, but I want to be able to have my own site admin be able to learn. They need to know how to see initiatives and all that. And so we've had to work with Tableau to customize courses to do that for us, but there's nothing out of the box that I can go to Tableau and what I want to do. Those are some areas that I thought.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. That's super helpful. Was there a question, or did it?
No.
Okay. No, that's wonderful. We love to hear that stuff. Thank you. I did see another hand here. Yeah.
Is there any sort of guidance, best practice on the number of features where you want to have an actual structured program versus a little bit more ad hoc? We're going to launch this around everyone?
Yeah. So it can be. So if you're thinking like kind of classroom training is kind of being a chunk of that, it can feel awkward to run a class with less than like 5 people. And more than 15 can start to be kind of a very gnarly experience.
Depending on how many people you have supporting that class. Like,
Yeah.
Are you the only one doing this? Do you want more than that?
Right, but so then the other kind of thing to think about is like how often are we going to have to run this, right? If we're hiring new people every week, that tells you. If it's like we got the 5 people on the team, they're probably going to be here for a while. We'll all work through it. I mean, I guess it sort of depends on how formalized you want that program to be. Are you going to customize everything for that team of 5? Probably not. But you may want to build into your professional development program, like we want to make sure we're taking these courses, we're staying up to date, those kinds of things over the course of a couple years. Does that help?
I think so. I just sort of, when we're looking at end users, you know, if we're looking at eventually going at, say, I don't know, 40 people that are, like, is that at the point where you want to have sort of, obviously you don't want 40 people in there.
Yeah. I think if you're thinking about 40 people, that's where you think about the size of your class. Like if you're that only person, maybe thinking about taking 10 to 15 people in each course. 5 people is a little too few because there's a social learning aspect in the courses too, where you can bounce ideas off of other students in the room. So 10 to 15 tends to be a really great mix, and it makes it easier for you as well as an instructor. But then that's also an easily consumable amount of classes too. Now, if you were talking like 200, then that's where you start thinking about, do I do a seminar where it's mostly me just talking to you, like what we were doing today, like just really that public speaking? But if you want it to be interactive, try to keep it in the smaller bite size. Yeah.
Were there other questions? You guys.
So, yeah, so for the training, I guess if you're training analysts, they're going to go back and work with Tableau every day.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to be really good for their retention of the knowledge.
Yeah.
For the knowledge workers, I always find it a bit of a struggle because you can teach them, they're like, aha, okay, I understand, and then they don't do anything for 2 weeks.
Right.
And do you have any tips on how to make it stick for them? Because it's going to be instant.
Yeah, so one thing is if you're thinking classroom training, like those people in particular absolutely need the hands-on training we're doing the practice. We talk about building resources like job aids. Like if you can predict, there's a couple things they're always going to need. Like sometimes training isn't the answer. Like you don't need to sit in a classroom. You need a printed list of the steps to log into server. That's what you actually need. And so providing some of those resources at the time can help, and that can kind of reduce the number of calls you're getting 2 weeks later that are like, oh, how do I do this thing? But then also providing things in a format that people can revisit. This is why videos are effective. This is why e-learning is effective, is because like, yeah, I remember I did learn about that thing, but I would really like to go back and actually watch it again, especially if you can kind of do a little more just-in-time training in that way. So depending, kind of what those needs are. Does that help?
Yeah, so maybe record the training or provide small engagement.
Yeah, that can be one helpful way to deal with that. Yes, it is a lot of work.
This is a lot of work. I mean, it's our full-time job, training, so.
There was another question over here, yeah.
I just had a comment. In trainings that I've done, one thing I find useful at the end is go around the room and say, what's one thing that you've learned today that you can use in your work tomorrow? And so it gets them thinking about how can I apply these skills into the work I'm going to do tomorrow or next week. But then also, in packed rooms, as I have no idea, maybe it wasn't the best training for that people. So it's just something to think about.
That's super good. I mean, we're learning more that reflection is a really important way to cement learning with folks. So that's I love that. Thank you. No question? Yeah.
So I want to learn, or I want to know how you guys could help me change the mindset of my company. It's very entrenched in Excel. There's all these reports, I've got a lot of cubes. All they want to do is take the data, dump it into Excel, and then work with it themselves. I've tried showing them how Tableau is awesome. They say, great, you build us the dashboards. I build dashboards, I never use them.
Oh.
I've got 3 people who are actually using that I've sat down and trained them personally on it and got them on 3 videos. And we, one of them we ended up sending over to a training, one of you guys training. So they don't want to share their knowledge. They don't want to champion. They don't want to be that person. How do I get through that and really start getting my company to adopt that?
I think this will be our last question, but do you mind if I answer this?
Please, please. Please.
Man, I don't envy the position you're in, and I think that this is where you have to find out what's the motivator. And when I was first learning Tableau, and this was 6 years ago now, it's been a long time, but I was learning Tableau at the same time that I was also learning Six Sigma. And when I was taking Six Sigma at the same time Tableau, I had this aha moment while I was doing it. It showed me I could create efficiency, I could reduce redundancy, and really eliminate a lot of waste in my reporting as far as using Tableau compared to other systems I was using. So those to me were 3 areas that were motivators, but those motivators translated to bottom line for other people as well. What motivates them? If you can reduce the work that you're doing, that means you potentially can do more. So yes, Tableau creates amazing, beautiful visualizations, but what else does it do? It's that whole process around analytics in addition to it. It's being able to do more with Tableau than you can something else. So it's really about how are you going to craft that statement? How are you going to have that conversation? So that's really where it's going to start for you, I think. What is their motivation? What is it they want to accomplish out of this? And how you can help support that with the use of Tableau. No problem.
So thank you all for coming. This has been really fun for us. Like I said, we'll be here for a few more minutes. We're heading down to the Global Services Hub. If you want to talk about this anytime the rest of the week, you've got our email addresses. Please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.